Hi there. Okay, here we go. Okay, can you hear me? I've got a little different sound setup today because I'm trying to do a few different things. So please let me know if you can hear me. Can you hear me? Say what, Bonnie? Can you hear me, Bonnie? Oh, okay, thanks. Is there any echo? Oh, Devorah says yes. Good, Devorah. Rick Maynard is here. Hey, hey, Rick. You can turn it down in your own sound, Bonnie. You have to click at the icon on the bottom. Mark Collins, hi. Haven't seen you for a while. Great to see you. And the water fountain in the background as well. Don't know what that water fountain is. As far as I know, there's no water fountain in the background. Sounds like you're in the bottom of a deep hole, Rick says. Lana says no echo. How about now? How about now, everybody? Rick said turn down my volume. Do I sound better when you turn down your volume? My mic is a little too loud. It's the mic in my camera that I'm using today. I will attempt to fine tune that. Oh, I think I know what's wrong. Let's see what happens now. Okay, is that better? Better, it's okay now. Rick says still a little rough. Okay, it's rough for some. Okay for others, I guess. Okay, so going on then. Going right to the news that I just got a notification on my feed from Jamal Thomas that he has YouTube going that says that the results are 100% in. I don't know what difference that makes. The latest results I have from Real Clear Politics are 99% reporting, which only came in a few minutes ago, by the way. They kept things the whole day at 96%. After yesterday, they were saying 97%. Okay. Anyway, they just came in with a 99% report. Okay. In that report, Bernie is ahead after the second round by 2,600 plus votes in percentages. He's at 26.6. Okay, Buttigieg is at 25.0. State delegates were 564 for Buttigieg and 562 for Bernie. And the national delegates, the DNC delegates, the ones that count, okay, are 11-11 for both. So as you probably know by now, Bernie went on this afternoon and announced that he was the victor, okay, in Iowa. And he was asked by some reporter in the crowd, well, why should we believe your claims rather than Pete's claims? Okay, and Bernie said, well, I have 6,000 votes more. Now, he was referring to the first round of votes where he got 43,671. Pete got 37,557, a difference of 6,000. He said that's a rather decisive win, and that's why I think that I'm the winner, okay, in Iowa. Then he pointed out that the state delegates are of no consequence to anything. They do not actually reflect anything about the chances of someone for the nomination. So he said he felt very justified in saying that he had won Iowa. And he thanked his people for a great campaign, answered a number of other questions, exhibited a great deal of gruffness towards the reporters, because, of course, the narrative going around Washington is, first of all, they only look at the state delegates, and they don't look at the actual votes, and they're not, some are acknowledging there's a tie in national delegates, okay, at 11-11, but it doesn't seem that very much of the mainstream is taking seriously the fact that Bernie got considerably more votes than Mayor Pete did. Now, that is not surprising. Now, I don't know why the Real Clear Politics totals only reflect 99% and evidently 100% are out. Somewhere, I don't know where exactly. I will check at the register and see if they have different information right now. Well, they're saying that there are complete results as of 40 minutes ago. I'm waiting for Des Moines Register to come in. I am sure they will in just a moment. Well, Des Moines Register said 99.94% reporting, and they're giving Pete, they're giving Pete 564 delegate votes and Bernie 562. And these, of course, are the state delegates. Other results are Warren at 387, Joe Biden at 341. So Warren is at 18% and Biden is at 15.8%. Now these are percents of the state delegates, not percents with respect to the popular vote. Amy Klobuchar's 12.3, and Andrew Yang, who's listed for some reason, I don't know why, but he's at 1%, okay, in terms of delegates. They gave 22 state delegates to Andrew Yang, according to the Register. Real Clear Politics had Yang with 22 state delegates, which is supposed to be 1% of the total. Klobuchar at 12.3%, and Joe Biden at 341 state delegates, which comes to 13.7%. I'm sorry, that's 13.7% of the popular vote that I'm reading now. So Biden had 13.7% of the popular vote. So Sanders doubled Biden's popular vote in this particular contest. Okay, and according to the Register, again, 99.94% of the reports happen to be in. Now this is, I guess, the official Iowa Democratic Party final results. Of course, the National Party has called for a recanvassing. That is, they want a second chance to cheat Bernie better, right? A second chance to cheat him better than they did the first time around. Isn't that wonderful? But there is reason to doubt. There is reason to doubt whether this tally of votes by the Iowa Democratic Party is really legitimate. So let me do this. Okay, let me see whether I can finally do something that I've been wanting to do correctly for some time, but which my monitor was interfering with. Hang on for a second. Okay. And let me see if I can play this for you and you can hear it. This is a YouTube. Which is posted by Political Forecast, okay, election predictions. By the way, I really like this guy's, the way he handles polling. He is much more objective, to my mind, than many of the other people who go over polls, and much more fair to Bernie Sanders. I was sent this poll by Lana Dell. Thank you, Lana. I hadn't encountered it yet, or at least I shouldn't say I hadn't encountered this particular review of the polls. Anyway, let's take a look and see if you can hear this as I play it.
Welcome back. So this is relatively big news for the Sanders camp, and that is the fact that the Morning Consult has been one of the more bullish polling outlets on Joe Biden over this past year throughout the run-up and build-up to the 2020 Democratic primary season, and this is actually the first result that we're getting from the Morning Consult throughout this period of time over the past year, where Bernie Sanders actually has surpassed him in the most recent results, where he's in first place, albeit very competitive certainly at the top with Joe Biden, where Sanders at 25%, and Joe Biden's at 24% following the Iowa caucus. And we can see how things have been trending towards Sanders over the past few days, where he picks up 3 points. Joe Biden takes a 5 percentage point step back, And then you have Michael Bloomberg there in third place at 15. Pete Buttigieg gets a boost out of Iowa where he's up to 12%. Elizabeth Warren takes a little bit of a step back where she's at 11%. And then you have Yang at 5, Klobuchar and Steyer each at 3 percentage points respectively. But again, the fact that this particular polling resource has been so bullish on the former vice president, he has had a considerable gap, usually double digits over his closest competitor. And that has completely shrunk to now where you essentially get a statistical tie at the top and Bernie Sanders edging it out at 25% compared to Joe Biden's 24%. And I've been saying this following the Iowa caucus that it's actually a really good thing for Bernie Sanders that Pete Buttigieg ended up surprising and having a bit more success than what people were expecting in Iowa, because since Buttigieg occupies the same centrist-type lane as Joe Biden, he was likely to get a boost from that, and that would directly take away from somebody like Joe Biden. We're seeing that with Biden losing 5 percentage points in this instance while people...
Okay, so I wanted you to see a little of that and to point out to you that Bernie has gotten a big boost, okay, from Iowa, in spite of the Buttigieg bump. As many have pointed out, okay, at this point, the Buttigieg bump is very good for Bernie. Okay, the Buttigieg bump, okay, is very good for Bernie. Before I go further, okay, I'd like to know if you heard me play the YouTube that I just played, okay, the political forecast YouTube. Did everybody see and hear that? Okay, please let me know, because my Facebook screen was frozen and I couldn't really tell whether you heard that or not. So let me know if you did before I go on with commentary. If you didn't hear or see it, hear and see it, then I will go ahead with some other commentary on it. Okay, Bonnie says she heard it, and Russ said, yes, I heard the YouTube. Okay, that's good, because I haven't been able to successfully play a YouTube for you before. I think because my mic was interfering with it, and there was a conflict with the monitor that I plug into this as well. And I think for those two reasons, I wasn't able to play any of these things for you. But since you've heard it, what I want to point out is, of course, it turns out that we should feel encouraged, because what happened, okay, in Iowa has resulted in a bump for Bernie, evidently, in the morning consult poll, which is one of the better polls to take a look at. Okay, so this is, okay, a good result, okay, where Bernie is +3 and Joe Biden is -5. He's lost 5 points, okay, in this National Democratic primary poll. This is Bernie's first lead in this poll. It's a 25-24 lead. Okay, Bloomberg was -1. Pete got a bump. Of course, he had been down on February 3rd. He was down at 7, and he got a bump up to 5. So he got the largest bump out of this. But Warren lost two, even though she did fairly well, in Iowa, according to the official count. But to get back to the Iowa results, to get back to the Iowa results, I think it's important to wonder, very important to wonder, how the Des Moines Register poll, which is supposed to be the gold standard poll in Iowa, and would show Pete behind by 26-16. It seems to me highly questionable that Pete could have gained 9 points going from 16 to 25 over the weekend. Now, Pete had done a lot of events in Iowa for the 2 weeks that Bernie was in D.C., but at the same time, Bernie was gaining in Iowa during those particular 2 weeks. And it was also true that by the time of the earlier poll, which ended on Saturday, February 1st, it was also true that Pete was polling at 16 points, according to that poll, which is considered a very reliable poll, for Iowa. And he finished out at 25% after the second round and 21% after the third round. So we're supposed to believe that Pete gained 5 points in the popular votes in the first round and 9 points in the second round, and that but Joe Biden, who I believe was somewhere around 17 or 18 on Saturday, went down to 15% after the first round, and then 13.7% after the second round. It's hard to believe. I feel pretty certain that the Iowa counts were bollocks by the state party. But I'm still not sure I'd like a recanvassing there, for the simple reason that I don't want to give the National Party a chance to steal from Bernie even more, in Iowa. The fact remains that Bernie can claim a victory, in Iowa. He is claiming a victory. He is gaining momentum and building his head of steam in New Hampshire. So I think turning to New Hampshire is now a very good idea. But, of course, we now have to think ahead. And we have to start talking about the subject of the next article, which is by Lee Camp. It appeared in Truthdig, and it says, they're going to try to steal California from Sanders again. And Lee did kind of an entertaining article. And he makes the point to start with that Iowa devolved into a chaos, like a car crash in slow motion. And he also says, I regret to inform you that California will be stolen from Bernie Sanders. He says it's happening now, and anyone with a vague understanding of what took place in 2016 should know how the grand theft will go down. But the good news is there's still a chance to have a legitimate vote in the land of sunshine and broken dreams, which is why the DNC probably doesn't want you to read this column. So if DNC Chair Tom Perez comes around and dumps hot tea in your lap in the next few minutes, you'll know why. He has a lot of free time, says the review. He points up that California has 495 delegates up for grabs. Last I looked, it was 471, but I'll take Lee's word for it. And it's even more important this year because its primaries have moved up to Super Tuesday. Lee refers to Bernie Sanders as, quote, old man rational, unquote. He points out that he's jumped to the top of the California polls. So what's California doing? Well, they're making it really hard for a person to vote if he isn't a full-on, bread-and-butter, Joe Biden-loving Democrat who owns a T-shirt featuring Barack Obama riding on a dinosaur. And candidates like Bernie attract a lot of voters who are outside the two corrupt Wall Street parties, i.e. independents. And independents are no small group. In fact, 45% of Americans consider themselves independents, but only 27% call themselves Democrats, and 27% say they are Republicans. So just to give you a little bit of historical perspective on this, back in 2010, 40% of Americans said they were independents, while 30% said they were Democrats, and a little less said they were Republicans, maybe 27%, and then there were 3% that were in the minor parties. So the percentage of independents has gone up by another 45 points in the last 10 years. Anyway, Lee goes on and points out that if you're an independent in California when you registered to vote, some of you probably checked the box that said American Independent Party. There's only one problem with that. The American Independent Party is a borderline neo-Nazi group. It's the name of a party that opposes gay marriage, hates immigrants, and apparently hates women. Because the last line of the manifesto of the party, of course it has a manifesto, actually states, quote, in consequence whereof, we call upon all men who value their God-given liberty to join us in pursuit of these political convictions, unquote. The emphasis is added, but you could feel it, says Lee. Can I also add that I strongly believe one can't just follow racist, sexist crap with the antiquated phrase, quote, in consequence whereof, unquote, and think that makes it okay. Rarely do you hear a story like, quote, the other day someone said to me, in consequence whereof I consider you a bucket of dicks, unquote. And I responded, quote, why thank you, my good man. And forsooth, go screw yourself, unquote. Well, he didn't use the F word. So do you think a lot of independents in California accidentally sign up for the bigotry party? Yes, they do. Quote, the Los Angeles Times investigation has found that a majority of the American Independent Party's members have registered with the party in error. Nearly 3 out of 4 people did not realize they had joined the party, unquote. So Californians need to be warned that if they want to vote for someone outside the centrist, say Bernie Sanders, they need to change their party affiliation to either Democrat or no party preference. But it gets even worse. In order to stop the no party preference people, quote unquote, from voting, the state, read the corporate Democratic machine, does not give them a ballot with the presidential choices on it, which is ridiculous, says Lee. And of course, it is totally ridiculous and corrupt. Lee asked, do they honestly think millions of people skipped work to stand in line at a polling place playing Pokemon on their phones for 3 hours in order to vote for the city council's assistant treasurer? No. They showed up to tell Joe Biden to check into retirement, into a retirement home. And I would add, eat ice cream. And if there is indeed a way they can vote in the presidential primary, but it's complicated. To sum up, millions of California independents are accidentally signed up for a racist, homophobic party. Millions more are handed a ballot without presidential candidates, in consequence whereof millions of people will not get to cast a vote in the primary. But as investigative journalist Greg Palast has revealed, it gets even worse. He wrote, quote, if an NPP voter, the no party preference voter, asks the poll worker, quote, how do I get to vote in the Democratic primary, unquote, the poll workers are instructed to say that NPP voters can't get Democratic ballots. And Lee says the poll workers are not lying, kinda. NPP voters can't get Democratic ballots, but they can get Democratic crossover ballots, which do include the presidential race. So as Palast explains, quote, if you don't say the magic words, quote, I want a Democratic crossover ballot, unquote, you are automatically given a ballot without the presidential race, unquote. And he continues, you have to say the goddamn golden phrase to get to vote. Poll workers are merely instructed to lie to independents unless the voter has the passcode. He says, it is bananas that it's this hard to obtain the correct ballot in California. And he follows on with, I've had an easier time procuring meth in a Mormon household. Because of these intentional hurdles designed to stop independents from voting, millions of Californians will be handled something called, quote, a, quote, provisional ballot, unquote. And he says, let's see, how do I explain a provisional ballot? You know when a little toddler has a ball and they go to throw it and they cock their arm back and then the ball rolls out of their hand behind them and they end up throwing nothing but air, but they think they threw the ball, so you can see them watching for where the ball is going to land? That's a provisional ballot. It's a lot of build-up, but you don't do shit, because no one will ever count it. He says, in truth, a certain percentage of those provisional ballots are indeed counted, but by the time they are, it's too late. The results have been reported, and the provisional ballots are really just an afterthought. For this reason, Palast calls them the placebo ballots, quote unquote. They're designed to make you think you voted. So don't accept a provisional ballot. Demand your right to vote in the presidential primary. Demand a Democratic crossover ballot. The election integrity activists in California also recommend people vote early, which can be done right now in person at your county Department of Elections. That way you'll have plenty of time to deal with what they call the election integrity business, the fuckery. Sorry to read this one, but it's too good not to. Ironically, our government fights to make sure as few people as possible vote in our elections. Since the mainstream media has been captured by corporate America, only alternative media now reveals how the wealthy and the powerful gain the systems. So tell your sun-bleached Cali friends. Now, well, my daughter lives in Cali now. I don't think she's become sun-bleached, but anyway, to demand a real ballot with the presidential candidates on it. I'm not going to tell you or them who to vote for, but in consequence whereof, the American Independent homophobe party is fighting for your rights, such as the right to speak like it's the mid-1800s, as long as you're a white male landowner of military age. Immigrants and women need not apply. He could have added people of color need not apply either. Anyway, that's what Lee had to say about watching out for theft, guarding against theft of millions of votes in California by the capital D Democratic Party. The undemocratic Democratic Party. So let's move on to more post-mortems. What could be more appropriate? What could be more appropriate? Let me see if they've absolutely corrected the Real Clear Politics live results yet. For some reason, I trust them more than the Des Moines Register reporting, because the Des Moines Register doesn't want to give us the damn popular vote. All they want to do is traffic in the state delegate votes, because they don't ensure that the person with the majority, or I should say with a plurality of the votes, is the winner. As we see right here, Pete Buttigieg has 43,195 votes, and he has 564 state delegates. Bernie has 45,826 second round votes, and he only has 562 state delegates. What was wrong with Bernie's people? Were they missing a toe or something? What was wrong with them? Anyway, speaking of fascism, let's move on to Henry Giroux's article. I never met him, so I don't know how he pronounces it. But in French, it would be Giroux. But Henry, as I seem to recall, is from Brooklyn and not from France. But anyway, he has a few choice words in this article which you are seeing now, which you should be seeing on your Facebook screens, if Facebook has gotten there yet. Probably your Facebook has, but mine needs to have a refresh on its page. My Facebook page is probably not getting either your comments or what my expert software is putting out there. So now you're seeing the page. I will make it more friendly. It's from Truthout and was written by Henry Giroux on February 5th. And Henry begins by talking about the ghost of Orwell. And he says that ghost has never been far from the misleading rhetoric, the outright lies, and the dehumanizing invective and punitive policies of Donald Trump, which were all on full display in the State of the Union address. He points out Trump's speech moved between the kind of absolutes one expects from demagogues, including comments that range from how great America is, overlooking how many millions live in poverty and millions have lost health care under Trump, and how the U.S. economy is in an unprecedented boom, when in reality it grew at its lowest pace since 2016. When, of course, Trump wasn't the president. Trump's speech also included outrageously false claims about the president's supposed support for people who have pre-existing conditions and protection of Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid, when in reality he has taken steps to eliminate or weaken protections for patients with pre-existing conditions, and he has proposed cutting those programs. And Henry next points out that authoritarian societies protect the powerful, not the poor and the vulnerable. And Trump made that clear. He boasted about his tax policies that largely benefit the ultra-rich and major corporations. He lied about supporting workers' rights and restoring manufacturing rights, even as he continues to implement various kinds of regulatory rollbacks that endanger both the environment and the health of workers and many other people in the U.S. His claim that he has launched the Great American Comeback is laced with death-dealing policies that range from criminalizing social problems, demonizing and punishing undocumented immigrants and their children, and laying claim to ultranationalist and white supremacist types of rhetoric that echoes the social and racial cleansing policies of earlier fascist societies. Yes, to make a long story short here, but Trump's rhetoric is just outrageous in the gap that it creates between what he says and what is actual reality that we live in each day. It is incredible how so many of the people of the United States, 49% in the latest polling, are approving of his presidency when the reality is stabbing them in the face. Of course, you know by now he gave the Presidential Medal of Freedom to Rush Limbaugh. Who characterizes a conservative radio host whose unchecked racism, racism, also misogyny and sexism is his calling card. Trump refers to national health care, which most advanced countries have, as, quote, socialist, unquote, and absurdly seeks to portray such health programs as designed by Democrats largely to benefit undocumented immigrants, which is, of course, truly ridiculous. And of course, Trump is also entirely ignorant, as well as malintentioned. Henry points out that his most fascistic statements centered around celebrating ICE officers, conflating undocumented immigrants with criminals, quote unquote, and describing sanctuary cities as a threat to American security and safety. Of course, he bragged about stacking the federal courts with right-wing judges. Thank you, Mitch McConnell. He didn't say thank you, Mitch McConnell, but thank you, Mitch McConnell. Let's pay him back in the appropriate way by kicking his butt from here to eternity. Meanwhile, he bragged about stacking the courts with right-wing judges and expressed admiration for those examples of sterling integrity named Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh. And Henry points out that the speech reeked with the mobilizing passions of fascism, extreme nationalism, expansion of military power, outright racism, lawlessness, contempt for dissent, and anti-immigrant hatred and bigotry. Amid all this, the Republican-controlled Senate was willing to overlook Trump's authoritarianism, disdain for democracy, and ruthless grab for power, and acquit him of the impeachment charges, all the while making it clear that matters of evidence, facts, truth, and justice were irrelevant to the Republican senator's decision. And Henry points to the grim shadow of authoritarianism, the growing threat to U.S. democracy from it, the deeply authoritarian nature of Trump's government. And he says it's crucial to analyze the current crisis of governance in a broader context that analyzes fascism as a possible wave of the future. And then Henry invokes the conditions and crisis that produce the discontent of millions of people who are embracing a politics of fear in the face of economic instability and climate insecurity. That, of course, is right on the mark. But he goes on to sketch, the dynamics of the problem, the language operating in the service, of violence, the fact that ignorance has become a national ideal, among many. That is, it's not about actually knowing things. It's about making decisions based on your gut, right? Based on your gut. Ignorance is a virtue. because it supports you're making your decisions based only on your gut. Because what else do you have to base your decisions on if you're ignorant, right? Religious fundamentalism, white supremacy, and economic tyranny now inform each other. Well, I think I'd say they reinforce each other, but yes. And Giroux says, giving rise to an updated recurrence of fascist politics. So Giroux writes this extremely well, and his prose is colorful and interesting, and I commend the article to you. I think it's a very important article. He refers to what Hannah Arendt once called, quote, the ruin of our categories of thought and standards, okay, of judgment. We certainly see this in the Senate, where people don't seem to know how to speak anymore. Giroux says, in the absence of a comprehensive politics capable of defining the related parts and threads that point to a society in crisis, the violence, especially as related to the joining of a predatory neoliberalism and a fascist politics of white supremacy, becomes the regulative principle of everyday life. I certainly don't like what's happening, and I don't like the result of that, but I do like the structuring of that particular sentence and the ending. It becomes the regulative principle of everyday life. And that's what we're seeing, right? And we can't seem to mobilize effectively against it. At least many of us still are not able to mobilize effectively against it. I personally think the mobilization of the Sanders campaign is certainly against it. But we're not powerful enough yet. Not powerful enough yet to stop it. We need more people in the streets. And Henry goes on to briefly survey the fact that similar things are happening in other nations, as well as here. He says this is a crisis produced in part through a full-scale attack on the welfare state, labor, and public goods. And he points to the thinning of democracy, and the social sphere and social contract no longer occupy an important place in Trump's America. This is not sudden. There's been a grinding down of these things going on for years and years, okay, in our society. Yeah, we've been seeing it for 40 years now. The current historical crisis not only refigures the social sphere as a site of commercialism and infantilism, but also redefines the matters of individual and social agency through the mediation of images in which self-alienation is reinforced within a culture of immediacy, disappearance, and a flight from any sense of social responsibility. So I wanted to give you a sense of the flavor of that article and to recommend that you read it. It's very comprehensive. It's probably one of the more important articles that have appeared in the recent weeks for its sketching out of the process of change that we are going through and the growing threat of authoritarianism and fascism and overthrow of democracy, which we are now facing. And Giroux sees the rise once again of white supremacy thinking as being a major thread in the development of the new fascism under Trump. And I agree, that is what we're looking at. That is in part what is driving the increasing frequency of attacks on black citizens here in the United States by the police. Giroux talks about civic education and civic literacy as an antidote to Trump's culture of lying and manipulation. We all know about the lies and the gaslighting consistently emanating from the Trump administration. We don't recognize it, but it is true that to an extensive degree, the health of a democracy depends on the frequent presence in public life, okay, of honesty. But when we look at our public life today, when we look at our politics today, what we see is a huge quantity of lying. We not only see it from Trump, a character like Mayor Pete, who lies casually and with a smile and in not so blatant a way. The presence and the occasional popularity of politicians such as he should warn us that Trump is not the only threat, that there are many, many, many politicians who are systematically manipulative and systematically dishonest. And there are only very few who carry an aura, okay, of honesty with them, who even make an attempt to be honest and to tell us what it is they really think. People like Bernie Sanders, people like Tulsi Gabbard, also the Nina Turners of this world, generally speaking, the Ro Khannas of this world. Jeff Merkley is another one, okay, who's pretty good. They are increasingly rare. Okay? I tweeted yesterday that 95% of the office holders, okay, in Congress who say they're Democrats are not real Democrats. If what you think is a real Democrat is someone who follows a modernized version and a green version of the Economic Bill of Rights, okay, of FDR. That is the hallmark of what it ought to mean to be a Democrat. And yet, 95% of the Congress is not there today. Is not there today. Instead, we see political theater we see spectacle. We see both parties standing up during the State of the Union to give a bipartisan standing ovation to Juan Guaido, certainly a fascist figure himself, and in doing so, to applaud the attempt at regime change in Venezuela using Juan Guaido as its tool. What did Juan Guaido really have to recommend him, even to the intelligence agencies of the United States? Well, he'd been in the CIA training camp. And of course, he is very good looking and has a veneer of polish. But standing behind him are the violent ones who have burned people alive in Venezuela. So again, I recommend this article to you. It really is a wonderful piece of work. I did want to provide a little bit of an antidote to this. There is a tendency, okay, I think among us, to take too seriously certain specific acts that have occurred and that we see as really terrible. And that's reflected in the headline of this article, also in Truthout. The Senate has spoken. U.S. presidents can abuse power without consequence. And this one was written by Sasha Abramsky for Truthout. Sasha is a good writer. But I think this headline is way off base. Trump was acquitted Wednesday on a largely party line vote. The trial was obviously rigged by the Senate. We all know the details. We also know that Trump's so what defense has won. Okay, in this case, Sasha thinks Trump has shed one of the last restraints on his tyrannical presidency. Specifically, I think, talking about here or referring to the constraint imposed by the threat of the House impeaching the president. And Sasha Abramsky says the consequences will ricochet through the body politics for years, perhaps for generations to come. Okay, so I want to point out a couple of things. What the Senate has done is to vote down an impeachment by the House of the president on rather narrow grounds. This was not the kind of impeachment which was attempted of Nixon during the 1970s. His impeachment was much more broadly based. The case was tellingly made that his actions were a threat to our democracy and to our institutions. The case was tellingly made based on illegal actions that he was fully in support of, something easily identifiable as a crime, specifically a burglary. He was also impeached when evidence was presented that showed that he was obstructing justice. Here there was no obstruction of justice charge. There was an obstruction of the Congress charge. What is that? I mean, I know what it is, but the point is it was possible for the defense to say, why is that an impeachable offense? I mean, the Congress could have gone to the Supreme Court and asked it to compel the president to cease stopping people from giving testimony to the Congress. They could have held in contempt all kinds of witnesses. They didn't do this. They didn't create the constitutional crisis. They didn't bring the court in on their side. What would have happened if they had? I can't say. But I can say that they were obligated to push their constitutional role of oversight to its natural head, which was attempting to enforce that constitutional mandate in the courts. But Nancy Pelosi didn't want to do it because she was afraid it was going to get into the political season, into the political mess, and she didn't want it in the political mess. So she wouldn't compel the witnesses to come and testify to the House. Also, as I said before, the impeachment was carried out on narrow grounds. The book was not thrown at Donald Trump. A narrow incident was focused upon, something the intelligence community thought was very, very important. I agree, it is very, very important. But to many Americans out there, it doesn't seem like very much corruption. So he used the power of the government to gain some advantage in a coming election. Have not other presidents done similar things, albeit in more subtle ways? Why was it suddenly the case that Donald Trump was getting impeached for something like this? When the historical record is clear that Richard Nixon actually negotiated with were actually communicated to the Vietnamese, okay, the North Vietnamese, that if they only waited to make a deal in Paris, they would get a better deal from Nixon than they could get from Johnson. Yes, Nixon did that. I think Johnson should have locked him up for doing that. But he did that. That was a similar thing. And Reagan did something similar with the Iranians while he was running for president against Jimmy Carter. These are things that lots of Republicans have done, and they have not been impeached for this kind of thing. This doesn't seem significant to the everyday lives of people. On the other hand, Trump committed all kinds of corruption during his stay in the presidency. He was enriching himself and his family, using his office to do so continually. All the evidence is out there. All the evidence was out there to impeach him for that. But Nancy Pelosi declined because she didn't think it was good politics. How can you draw a general lesson from this botching of impeachment by the Speaker of the House and by a Democratic Party that's so full of corruption itself that it doesn't get excited over corruption? It got excited over the fact that one of their own was going to be persecuted by this president through his causing an investigation of them to be done. That's what they got excited about. They didn't get excited about the thorough corruption that pervaded his administration and his leadership from day one. They didn't get excited over the money he was taking from the Saudis. They didn't even enforce him. They didn't even go to court to force him to divulge those tax returns. In view of what the House did, it was easy for a Senate corrupted by Trump. It was a gift. That kind of an impeachment was a gift to such a Senate. It easily allowed them to depict the impeachment as a purely political thing with nothing of consequence to the American people in it, and nothing of importance in it. In spite of what the people so enamored of our intelligence system are, in spite of what they believe and what they feel the only important thing in America today is to maintain the integrity of our intelligence system. To have Medicare for all, that's not important enough to get angry about. To have a decent pension system for people as they get old, that's not important for people to get angry about. For a president to separate children from their families at the border of the United States, that's not important enough for people to get angry about. That we should be all exercised and all excited over a president who's trying to get a foreign leader to investigate a rival. I resist drawing a general lesson from this. This was something that occurred in a situation of extreme partisanship on both sides. And the act involved, from the standpoint of many people in the United States, was little more than a peccadillo. Yes, on legal grounds and constitutional grounds, it was enough to impeach Trump on. To lawyers, it was enough to impeach Trump on. Certainly, that's true. An impeachment would have been entirely justified. But why would the people of the United States, why would they think it was so important to impeach Trump that they would get angry at a Senate that did not convict for this peccadillo? Why couldn't they see that at the beginning? Now, people would convict if one could show systematic corruption of the whole administration and the enriching of the members of the administration at the very time that the administration was cutting benefits for people left and right and creating more and more poor people and beginning to threaten people to cut off Social Security and things like that. That kind of contrast would have mobilized people and motivated people and begun to get them to hate this administration and its people. There was a way to bring down the approval rating of this president to 35% or 33% or 33 or 30%. Nancy Pelosi did not take that path. The Democrats did not take that path because they didn't want to acknowledge that our political system is thoroughly corrupt, because they are such an important part of it and assist to a very high degree in its continual corruption. And they don't want that corruption to end. We see it in the actions of the DNC. We see it in their interactions with the donor class every single day. They don't want generalized corruption to be the issue. They wanted Trump's relatively small peccadillo to be the issue. So they lost the impeachment. And in the process, they made Trump slightly more popular for a while. I do not think he will remain so. I do not think this failure is going to result in the re-election of Donald Trump, however it may look now. Of course, this depends. If the Democratic Party is stubborn and insists on nominating a person that shares in the general corruption, then of course Trump is going to win again. He's just going to keep lying and run to the left of that particular establishment Democrat. It will be a close election. He and his thugs will monkey with the election machinery and perform all kinds of tricks, and they may openly win. But they won't win if a mass movement is against them. If the movement of the people is against them. They won't win then. And this idea that the actions of this Senate some kind of precedent regarding the general powers of the president, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. All that has to be done to show how ridiculous that is to make the next Senate a Democratic Senate. If you keep a Democratic House and give control of the Senate, okay, to Democrats as well, you will see a majority vote for impeachment. You will see majority votes for witnesses. You will see bringing out stories, all kinds of horrible stories from witnesses that make it impossible for the remaining GOP senators to vote for their president. Because you will see a process that drives that approval rating down to nothing. We didn't have this process on this occasion because we lacked a few senators to initiate it. This is not a precedent. It's a one-off political victory. He cannot do anything he wants. If he moves too fast and does too many horrible things over the next few months, he may well find himself with another impeachment hanging over his head. Now, it won't happen before the election. I'm sure the impeachment may. Certainly the conviction will not. But if enough facts are brought out in such an impeachment before the next election, he will be convicted if the charges are brought on broad grounds and truthful grounds and go to the heart of the matter. The president can be unconstrained by a particular Congress. But that doesn't mean he's going to be unconstrained. He or she, the president, will be unconstrained by all Congresses. Impeachment was never intended to be a perfect remedy. It was just one of the checks and balances which the Congress has. The Congress has other checks on the president. It could fail to vote him any money, for example. It could have stopped him from concluding that lousy trade deal he just concluded. It could have stopped him from giving all that money to the military. But what happened? Nancy Pelosi joined with him in that. And she and the House joined with him on the lousy trade deal. And the Democratic senators did too. This is a general failure of the political system. There's a lot that's wrong with the Constitution, but there was enough legislative power and is enough legislative power in the Constitution to stop a president. But of course, we need a political system underlying the Constitution that is not corrupt and is not tending towards fascist authoritarianism. We can't put this all on impeachment or flaws in the Constitution. There are constraints. We just need to have enough of a political movement to get Congress to exercise them. They are there in the law. Dershowitz's argument was nuts and was obviously opposed to the intent of the founders and obviously opposed to what the Constitution had to say. It makes a mockery of the separation of powers in the Constitution. Every other lawyer thought that Dershowitz was nuts. What Dershowitz proved is that lawyers are liars. That's what he proved. We knew that already, but this was another precedent for that general argument. That lawyers will say anything to defend a client of theirs, however corrupt that client is. Bonnie is sitting down. She has joined me. So, that's what I have to say, about that. This is not a precedent. Do not take it as a precedent. Do not accept it as such or consider it as such. Argue against it. Keep up the fight. Keep exposing the corruption. Keep adding to the movement. Above all, keep fighting for the movement. Expose every corrupt thing they do, regardless of party. Keep on fighting. We are going to win. And now, I ask you to please share, like, and subscribe. And please become a patron at www.patreon.com. That seems to suggest there's something wrong with my camera, but I don't think so. I think it's still working. Anyway, I'll now take a look at what you've been saying. And we'll go on that for a while. And Bonnie says, look at my monitor. There's nothing there because when I played the YouTube, I had to disconnect the monitor so the YouTube would play.
Okay.
So I'm just going to have to rely on... I'm going to put on my fine glasses here. And that should allow me to read the screen better. And Rick said Bernie was getting too many votes from satellite locations, so they changed the rules. Or maybe they're trying to change the rules now. I don't think even they can change the rules in the middle of the count. Kay says, I feel like we're living in Orwell's 1984, only it's Orwell's 2020. No, only it's 2020. On SMH, do not pull on that wire.
I was lifting it up because my foot was pulling it down.
And Zoltan Bexley and also Nissa Ray have joined. Welcome to both of you. Steve Wolfbrand says, New Hampshire is known for pretty fair elections as opposed to other states. I think Bernie should win it handily. Yes, I agree. I think New Hampshire is known for fairly honest elections. There's still a little bit of honor left in New Hampshire. Kay says she's very hopeful, and Steve says, I hope, Kay, that Mayor Cheat has some splaining to do in tomorrow's debates. I wonder whether the mainstream press is going to make him do some splaining. Rick says, put on my yellow vest when Paris let Bloomberg into the debate. My red kerchief is still in storage, though. I don't think that he let Bloomberg into the debate quite. He specified criteria that Bloomberg perhaps could meet. I'm not even sure that Bloomberg has met the latest criteria, which were constructed especially for him yet. And Rick says, according to Butthead, all the climate people supporting Bernie are dark money. All the climate people supporting Bernie are dark money. All the people giving $18 on the average are dark money. All the people making those gobs and gobs and gobs of $2.70 contributions 4 times a month are dark money. You think the dark money would waste its time by giving thousands of $2.70 dark money contributions? Steve Wolfbrand says, PD is CIA, I know. Rick says, acting on emotion, not intelligence. Bernie's campaign sent out letters saying the numbers from the IDP are not correct, and they point out the errors. Unbelievable. Yeah, I wonder how much data Rick, I'll skip that next comment. As a little too disrespectful. Not to the Republicans, mind you. Mark Collins has joined, and Steve Wolfbrand says, I'm very depressed but very encouraged at the same time. It's weird. John Prince has joined. Kate Clark, Ryan has joined. And Russ Gallman says, I've got to turn in. I'm tuning for a music festival. Pretty intense. See you again soon. Still has been a deserving week knowing the payoff that our libertarians like the Kochs have succeeded in building. Yeah. Now we watched them build it for 40 years, damn it. More than 40 years. And Rick Maynard says, getting ready for Blair Mountain Redux, 100% redneck. Yeah, where's Blair Mountain? Is that in Tennessee? Steve says, it's darkest before the dawn. They showed their true face, Kay, in Iowa. They've been showing their true face for years. Iowa was only the latest episode. Lana says, what about Mark Pocan? And Lana says, Lana, he backs and has endorsed Bernie. I think Lana knows that. And Lana says, I couldn't bring myself to watch the State of the Union. Yeah, I couldn't. I didn't watch the State of the Union yet. I mean, I've read articles about it. I know what he said and stuff like that, but I haven't got the full experience. Steve says, I haven't seen anyone but you say that Tulsi clapped for Juan Guaido, and I have a lot of contacts. All right. So once again, okay, for your sake, Steve, I will go back to the earlier view, the Common Dreams article. You're seeing the Common Dreams article, right? Okay. Now look at that photo. Okay, look at that photo. Who is this where my arrow is? Who is this? Is this not Tulsi in a white suit? Is she not giving the standing ovation to Juan Guaido? Am I mistaken about that? I mean, I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to believe your lying eyes. Is that her or not? Is that her nose? Is that her hair? Is that her suit? Are those her hands? I think maybe they are. Let me go back to my basic view then. So, okay, says I refuse to watch anything that has the orange idiot in it. And Dolores says I'm breathing into the mic.
Where is it?
I think the mic is far from my mouth, Dolores, as far as I know. That's my daughter suggesting that I'm breathing into the mic, but the mic is far away. The mic is in my camera. I think it's my camera microphone that I'm using tonight. Anyway, Steve is saying, perhaps Tulsi clapping for Guaido is a deep fake. It wouldn't be hard to do. Yeah, it's true. Dolores has joined. Kay says, some Congress people boycotted the SOTU. I would think Tulsi would have been with them, but don't know for sure. Steve says, maybe not so deep. You just take a video of Tulsi clapping for something, then overlay it with Guaido. Yeah, that could be done. But why would Common Dreams be doing that? That photo was picked up by Common Dreams. They like Tulsi. Steve says, I don't even know if she was there. Isn't it just for senators? No, it's for the whole Congress. The whole Congress comes to the State of the Union, the senators and the Congress people. And the Supreme Court justices are often there, quite a few of them. Kay says, no, it's for all of them, but some didn't go. Kay says, Bernie skipped it too, staying in New Hampshire. Yeah, you would think Tulsi would stay in New Hampshire too. She's been campaigning like crazy there. Ernest Jones has joined. Steve Wolfbrand says, I don't know much about Polkan aside from that, says Lana. And Kay points out he's the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Yeah, the other co-chair is Jayapal. Yeah, Polkan is pretty true blue liberal. He's a strong supporter of Omar also. Rick says, I could not watch the patronizing, lying Blippet. Blippet, 10 pounds of cow shit in a 5-pound paper or burlap bag. Jeez. Steve says, if you separate a very young child from her mother, it can fuck them up for life. It can. It can. From their mother. Rob Rivera has joined. Hey, Rob Rivera. Rick says, now do emoluments. They should have done that from the start. He does whatever he wants because the Senate and the DOJ let him. They're all corrupt as hell. Well, the part of the DOJ that is letting him is, what's his name? What the hell is that bastard's name? Anyway. Excuse me. Oh, Barr. Barr. Okay, so Barr has taken over the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice is a hierarchical organization. Trump has control of Barr, and Barr has control of the Department of Justice. So they're only as corrupt as hell insofar as they want to keep their jobs. In that sense, most Americans are corrupt as hell. Okay, I'm not entirely excusing them, but in this case, to end that particular form of corruption, we have to cut off the head. The institution rots from the head. Ralph Nader and Law wanted 12 counts. Yeah, I wanted 12 counts too. Steve says they cut the balls off our Congress and Senate. They're corporate whores. Well, I think our House and Senate that collaborated in their own castration. Yeah. Steve says, I tried to tell you, Doc, impeachment was a waste of time. It only helped Trump. Well, as I think I told you at the time, Steve, okay, I too thought it would be damaging if they pursued it in the way they did. So I did what I could. I was for impeachment, but I was never for that kind of impeachment. Steve says drinking some $3 Chuck. Yeah. Oh, by the way, I understand it's $2 Chuck in California, isn't it? That's what some Trader Joe's people were telling me here. You know, they were telling me if I move to California, I can save $1. Now they were telling me it costs $1 to get it here on the East Coast. Honestly, I saw some nonsense about Pete saying similar about Bernie donors. Yeah, Pete's going to have a tough time proving that, CIA or no CIA. Rick Maynard says data, paper, film, and pictures. Each precinct captain with their own phone app. Rick Maynard, The Blair Mountain Massacre. Rick Maynard, History of Rednecks. Is Blair Mountain in Tennessee or West Virginia, Rick? Blair Mountain, West Virginia. Ah, yeah. Watch the doc on films for Axion. Okay. Rick Maynard, History Channel is a good one as well. Rick says sounds like running water or your fridge is about to blow. Not that. Can't be that. The reason why I say that is the fridge is far away. Far away.
And the heat just went up.
The heat just went on, though. The heat does make a lot of noise in our apartment building. Doc, there would be a firestorm if Tulsi clapped for Guaido. You are mistaken. I got crickets. Well, all I'm saying is look at the photo, Steve. Now, you may be right that that part of the photo was faked and Tulsi was photoshopped in there. I'm not saying no. I'm just saying that is a picture of Tulsi in that photo. Whether it's actually a picture of her or whether it's doctored, I cannot say. I'm not attempting to accuse her. I like her.
I read that OAC didn't go.
AOC stayed away, yes. And as I understand it, the whole squad stayed away. Except maybe for Rashida, and I think she walked out. She walked out in the middle. She specializes in walking out. Plutocracy is the name of the doc on films for Actio. Was long but very informative. And Lana says Pompeo. Pompeo what? Anyway, I think that brings me to the end. If you have any comments or questions, this is my last call. And Bonnie is waving at me. She's waving at me. She's sitting here and she's going like, but she's also laughing. Good night, Steve. Have a good night. Hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. Oh, one more thing. I was supposed to have an interview with Richard Dean Woodfield, candidate for the Senate in Georgia. Unfortunately, due to technical problems on my side, we had to postpone that. So we postponed it till next Wednesday at 9 o'clock. So it's now scheduled for then. That should be more than enough time to solve this particular technical problem. Kay says, night all, great chat. See you soon. Rick says, night all. And I say, night all too. Night owls, night all.